and welcome back to our podcast, Chit Chat with Us. I'm EISYAH.
And I'm YUMNAH. And today we will be reviewing a very interesting case, and that is the case of Tan, Chong and Sons Motor Company, Sundar and Berhad versus MCKNIGHT, 1983. Before we start the discussion though, let us first give you a quick summary of the facts in this case. Stay tuned.
This is a matter concerning the sale of a car and a breach of warranty. The case involved a buyer, Alan McKnight, who was a squadron leader in the Royal Australian Air Force. On the 3rd May 1978, he sought to purchase a car that complied with Australian design regulation to benefit from duty exemption in Malaysia and Australia, despite the buyer's order containing a condition disclaiming any guarantee or warranty. Oral representation by the appellant salesman led the buyer to believe that the car conformed to the ADR. Subsequently, it was discovered that the car did not comply with the regulation, leading to a loss for the buyer. The respondent claimed damages for breach of warranty. The learned trial judge found that there had been a warranty and this was breached by the appellant. Then the respondent awarded general damages with interest, but no special damages were awarded as these were not pleaded, and an application for amendment of the pleaded was refused. At the hearing of the appeal, counsel for the appellants accepted the finding of fact by learned trial judge. The appeal was therefore confined to legal issues on liability and quantum only. Wow, this case is quite interesting, right, YUMNAH? And YUMNAH, do you know that in this case, I found 3 legal issues: whether the representation made by the appellants expressed by words and conduct is considered a breach of warranty in terms of collateral, whether there is evidence that shows that respondent entered into agreement based on the appellant salesman's promise, whether the salesman representation is binding to the appellant. And how about you, YUMNAH? Do you know what they argue for during the trial?
Yes, of course, EISYAH. Our first party in this case is the respondent, who is also the buyer. He argued that there was an existing warranty in this case, made by oral representations on the part of the seller. He argued that based on the principle of reasonable reliance, he was induced to make the purchase based on the seller's representation that the car being sold would be ADR compliant. He also contended that a written disclaimer does not negate oral representations made during contractual negotiations. The reason for this is because the person making these representations is an authorized seller of the product who is expected to have appropriate knowledge, accurate information, and knowledge on the specific product. In this case, that pertains to the specifications involved in the car being purchased. Thus, he argued that there was a breach of warranty. He was promised an ADR compliant car and he received one that wasn't. On the side of the appellant, however, he argued that there was no breach of warranty. This was because he argued there was no formal warranty in the first place. The appellant contended that oral representations made during negotiations would not be legally binding, especially considering that there is an explicit disclaimer in the contract that stated that there would be no warranties or guarantees involved in the contractual sale. This led them to contend that the buyer had unreasonable reliance, namely stating the factor of explicitness in the disclaimer of the contract. They also argued that the demands awarded by the court was too high, citing the fact that there was a lack of formal warranty. Now, these are some strong arguments. EISYAH, can you tell us what was the court's decision in this case?
Yeah, there are a few decisions made by court, which is the learned trial judge accepted the evidence of the respondent and found that there was such warranty made and breached by the appellants and awarded general damages with interest, and also there were no special damages were awarded. Yeah, that's. And you guys know that the appellant appealed to court contending that they are not liable and claimed that the damages were too high. And also the respondent cross appeal on the ground that the damages were too low, that he was entitled to the interest and also the special damages.
Now that is a very interesting decision made by the court. Let's talk a little bit about the ratio decidendi so we can understand why the court might have reached this conclusion. First would probably be the doctrine of collateral warranty. This doctrine states that statements made during negotiations could potentially be legally binding. This is what led the court to find that oral representations made in this case during negotiations, specifically promising that the car would be ADR compliant, was a warranty. The court also found that the respondent had reasonable reliance, as he relied on the statements of the appellant in order to fulfill the purchase. Namely, the court took into account the seller's knowledge and the authority of his position in knowing the specifications of the product. Based on the principles of reasonable reliance, a buyer is entitled to rely on the statements made by the seller in order to fulfill the purchase. And thus the court found that the buyer was induced into fulfilling the purchase via this statement, whether or not it was intentional. Knowing that there was reasonable reliance and also an existing warranty, the failure of the seller in fulfilling the standards set by themselves, which is providing an ADR compliant car, led there to be a breach of warranty. In terms of the damages that were awarded, the court decided to award general damages, taking into account the financial losses suffered by the respondent and also the loss of fiscal advantage as he would have to be paying taxes on his car. Special damages, however, were not awarded due to procedural issues, as this was not made apparent in initial pleadings and the court refused to amend any pleadings later on in the case. The first significance of this case is that it clarifies the legal principle of oral statements being made during negotiations having the potential to be legally binding. This encourages sellers to be responsible with what they mention in negotiations, and also to ensure that transparency and accuracy of information is prioritized during these contractual dealings. Secondly, it also highlights the importance of knowing that the buyer is entitled to damages in the case that representations fail to be upheld. This serves the purpose of protecting buyers from deceptive practices of the seller and preventing them from being misled during contractual negotiations. This creates a greater implication in the world of business practices, seeing that this case has precedential value. It acts as a deterrent to deceptive practices or misleading contractual dealings in future cases.
The case of Deep BINTI Production Limited and others against Harold Smith Motor Limited in 1965. This case provides a test to determine whether a representation made in the course of dealings for a contract was intended as a warranty. According to the test, if a representation is made for the purpose of inducing the other party to act on it and actually induce them to enter into the contract, it is prima facie ground for inferring that the representation was intended as a warranty. The maker of the representation can rebut this inference by showing that it was an innocent misrepresentation and that they honestly believe on reasonable grounds that it was true. This case provides a framework for evaluating the nature of representation made in the context of a contract.
Another case would be Heilbut, Simmons & Co. versus Buckleton, 1913. This case involved the sale of a rubber sample which the buyer was told would be of a certain caliber and quality. Later, upon receipt, they found out that it's not the case. In both this case and the case that we've discussed today, there is implied warranty involved. Both sellers made a certain promise and assurance in negotiation stages about the standard that would be met by the product or the quality that would be met by the product, yet this turned out not to be the case. In both cases, the court ruled in favor of the buyer and found there to be a breach of warranty. So, Aisha, that's all from us today.
Yeah, that's all from us. See you next time. Bye.
Let us know what you think of this episode by giving us a 5-star review and leaving your feedback in the comments.